every UFC fighter's best and worst title performance. Now, I was going to do every fighter's best winning performance because I figured their worst performance would just be their most recent loss. But I think some of these fighters' losing performances were actually more impressive than their winning performances. Starting off with the first fighter, Jon Jones. His best title performance was easily the Gus rematch. After a tough first fight where many people thought that Jones lost, he was able to dominate and finish Gus in the third round. Gus was in his physical prime for this fight. He was just 31 years old, and even though he did have a short career and retired around the age of 35, he still was in his physical prime. There is some controversy on why it was moved from Vegas to LA last minute because of Jones taking PEDs, but regardless, it was his best performance because he was able to dominate elite competition for really the first time in his career. I feel like his only real elite wins were Gus and DC, and in the DC fights they were pretty close, especially in the rematch before the knockout, and the first Gus fight was razor close. His worst title performance was Santos. While some may say Reyes, I think Santos was even worse, and I do think he lost the Reyes fight but won the Santos fight. But Reyes was a much younger fighter on the come up, good takedown defense, good boxing, super athletic. And Santos was an older fighter who was more of a vet. He started off very well in this fight, but he injured his knee around the midpoint, and had he not suffered this injury, he probably would have won the fight. And despite him being on one knee, Jones wasn't able to finish or dominate him. And the fact that arguably the greatest fighter of all time almost lost his undefeated streak to Thiago Santos is pretty crazy. Next up, Khabib. His best performance was easily the Dustin Poirier performance. Dustin was coming off of a great win against Max Holloway and was in his prime. Khabib was able to dominate and finish him in the third round, and despite the guillotine attempt, Dustin Poirier didn't really have anything for Khabib. And what makes this better than the Conor and Justin fight is in the Justin fight, Khabib lost the first round, and in the Conor fight, he lost the third round, unlike this fight where he didn't lose a single round of the fight. His worst performance was easily the Quinta fight. While he did dominate, he wasn't able to finish the number 11 ranked guy and was easily his worst title performance. Quinta showed up on short notice after Tony and Max Holloway pulled out against Khabib. It is pretty crazy how out of all of his title wins, this was the worst one of them all, and it was his worst performance. Next up, Jose Aldo. His best title performance was the Mendes rematch. While you could say it was the first Mendes fight where he KO'd him in the first round, this was honestly more impressive because Mendes looked a lot better in this fight, and it was more of a complete fight. And I believe it was the first or second round where Aldo really should have had the finish, but the bell saved Chad Mendes at the very end. He hurt Mendes multiple times throughout the fight, showed good cardio, good get-up ability, and almost finished him at the end of the round. His worst title performance, I do not think, was the Conor McGregor fight. And we have to think, it was prime Conor McGregor, and pretty much everyone lost in the first round to Conor McGregor. If you were going to lose to Conor, it was going to be by a first round KO, and that's exactly what happened. I think his worst title performance of all time was actually Mark Hominick when he won the UFC belt. Clearly won the fight, but it was a super stale fight, and he kind of just stayed on top for the majority of the fight. And he almost got finished in the fifth round after Hominick got on top and started landing good ground and pound. It showed that Jose Aldo doesn't have the best cardio, and it wasn't one of his better performances. Next up, Demetrius Johnson. His best title performance was Henry Cejudo, the first fight. Henry was 29 years old at the time, and it's not like he was 25, 24. I know people say he wasn't in his prime yet, but to put this into perspective, Ilia Topuria is 28 years old. He's younger than Henry Cejudo was in this fight. Guys in the lighter weight classes tend to hit their prime earlier as well. And I get Henry was focused on wrestling, so he started MMA a little bit later than usual, but he still was in his physical prime for this fight. And finishing Henry in the first round when Cejudo has a pretty good chin is super impressive and easily the best opponent Demetrius Johnson has ever faced. And the rematch only happened 2 years after this fight, so it's not like Cejudo made crazy improvements. He definitely was way better in the rematch, but it wasn't too much of a difference. His worst performance was John Dodson, the first fight. Now, John Dodson wasn't a can, but he wasn't elite competition, and Demetrius Johnson lost the first 2 rounds and was in a decent amount of trouble on the feet. This was not the usual dominant performance we were used to seeing with Demetrius Johnson, where he was finishing a bunch of guys, submitting guys, and just winning fights clearly. Next up, Daniel Cormier. His best title performance was easily the first Stipe fight, where he ended Stipe's streak and finished him in the first round. Stipe was defending his belt against pretty good competition at heavyweight, a much better heavyweight than the current one today, and he was coming off a very impressive performance against Francis Ngannou, where he outclassed him in the last 4 rounds, and DC made it look easy and finished him within 1. His worst performance was definitely his last performance against Stipe in the trilogy. At least with the second Stipe fight, he was winning the majority of the fight until he got finished, but this is the fight where his age really started to show and played a big factor. He was 41 years old and he didn't look terrible, but he definitely did not look like the prime DC that was fighting Jon Jones, fighting Gus, and even DC in the first Stipe fight. It was somewhat competitive and the eye poke definitely played a role, but it just was the worst he's looked. Now Stipe, his best win was the DC rematch. Even though he faced some adversity early on, he was able to make adjustments and it was the most complete fight of the trilogy. And I know a lot of his title defenses were against decent opponents, but Daniel Cormier is a much better fighter than the guys that he was defending his belt against, that it is easily the best opponent he's ever faced, and he was able to finish him. His worst was easily Jon Jones. He had no business being here. He was 42 years old. He was a part-time fighter and he had no business being in that octagon. It should have been Tom Aspinall. No one wanted to see this fight and it just was a sad fight to watch. Kamaru Usman. His best performance was when he won the belt against Tyron Woodley. Woodley was coming off of a really impressive win where he kind of dominated and finished Darren Till, who was known as a pretty good prospect at the time. And I think it's more impressive to beat Woodley than guys like Masvidal, Colby, Burns. And he just completely outclassed him 50-45. And I feel like this fight is not talked about enough for Kamaru Usman as his top wins. A lot of people just say he beat Masvidal twice, he beat Colby twice, and he beat Burns. That's it. No one really talks about his pre-title wins and taking the belt from Tyron Woodley. His worst performance, some may say the Leon fights, but I would have to disagree with that. The Leon rematch he looked really good in. I think his worst title performance of all time was the first Masvidal fight. Leon Edwards, I know he's known as being not as good, overrated, stuff like that. We have to compare him to Masvidal. He is a much better grappler than Jorge Masvidal. We'll never see Masvidal shoot takedowns and get them against Kamaru Usman, take down Colby. We'll never see that. That version of Leon Edwards against Usman was the best version of Leon we've ever seen in England. And Masvidal, who fought Kamaru Usman in the first fight, was on 6 days notice where he had to cut a bunch of weight, fly across the world, and it just was a lackluster performance, and it was a pretty boring fight where Usman kind of struggled to take him down, and he struggled more to take him down than Leon Edwards. Next up, Volkanovski. His best title performance, I think there's 2 that are pretty close. I would go with the Max Holloway third fight, because to 50-45 Max Holloway is just insane. Even when Ilya beat him, there was 2 really close rounds before he got the knockout, but for Volk, he outclassed him in all 5 rounds, and he made it look super easy. It is one of the most impressive victories in UFC history. His worst was easily the Islam rematch. 10 days notice. He had no business being in that octagon. Honestly, I know Gamrot was the backup opponent. I would have rather seen Gamrot versus Islam than Volk on 10 days notice. He was not training, coming off of surgery, and he got finished immediately. I think he landed like 1 significant strike during the whole fight. Next up, we have Max Holloway himself. His best performance was the Jose Aldo rematch. Unlike the first Aldo fight where he was kind of losing the first 2 rounds and then finished him in the 3rd round, he was winning the first 2 rounds of this fight and then got the finish in the 3rd, where Aldo had a lot less success in this fight compared to the first one. And for everyone saying Aldo was washed during this fight, he wasn't the same. He was 30 years old. He was not washed. Next up, we have his worst performance against Frankie Edgar. He clearly won the fight, but there was about 2 or 3 competitive rounds, and Frankie Edgar at the time was 37 years old. He was not in his prime, and Max Holloway, he didn't make it look easy. It was a pretty competitive fight and kind of a boring, slow fight. Islam Makhachev. His best title performance was easily the Charles Oliveira fight, where he ended Charles' 11 fight winning streak and submitted the guy with the most submissions in the UFC. He won the striking exchanges early, and most people thought if he wins the fight, he's just going to hold down Oliveira. But he was winning on the feet, avoided all the danger, and ended up dropping Charles and then submitting him in the 2nd round. His worst performance was definitely the Dustin Poirier fight. Dustin had already lost to Khabib and Charles, and Islam kind of struggled to to dominate him. He dominated in the first round, but outside of that, a lot of the other rounds were pretty close. He lost the fourth round and arguably lost the second. He was ahead in my opinion before the finish, but one judge had it 2-2, and while the finish was super impressive, it wasn't his best performance. Next up, Anderson Silva. His best performance of all time probably was the Forrest Griffin KO in the first round. After a very patient minute and a half, he started countering Forrest Griffin and just lighting him up. I believe he dropped him like 2 or 3 times, and the knockout was pretty embarrassing. Griffin wanted no more. He put his hands up and he was done. His worst performance was the Chael Sonnen fight. He was getting dominated on the ground. His takedown defense didn't look good. His get-up ability didn't look good. Up until the 5th round, he was losing all 4 rounds. He was able to get a Hail Mary submission and win the fight. But up until then, you really shouldn't need a Hail Mary submission against Chael Sonnen. Now, a close second would be the Damian Maia fight, where it was super boring. He looked decent early on, but the last few rounds, there was nothing happening. Next up, Israel Adesanya. Now, he has a few performances that could go here. Robert Whittaker in the first fight, Paulo Costa knocking him out early, his Alex Pereira knockout in the rematch. But I would say his best performance of all time would be the Robert Whittaker fight. It was a flawless performance where he was winning the first round. I believe he hurt him in the first round too, and then knocking him out in style in the second round. Now, the other option that I think is a more impressive performance than Paulo Costa and arguably the Pereira rematch, and I think it's his second best title performance of all time, is the Dricus fight. And I know he lost that fight, but what makes that so impressive, I don't think his takedown defense was better at any other time in his career. I think that he improved his boxing problem compared to earlier fights like the Sean Strickland fight. His output was crazy, especially in that third round. I think that that third round was the most impressive round of Adesanya's career. I think that Dricus is one of the best fighters Adesanya has ever faced. He's way better than Whittaker, and he's way better than Costa. I know Whittaker is close, but Dricus is the better fighter. Pereira, it's definitely arguable, but Dricus has way better grappling than Alex Pereira and is also pretty good on the feet, just not as dangerous. His worst performance was the Yoel Romero fight. Some may say the Strickland fight or the Vettori fight, but honestly, at least those were fights. This was not a fight at all. Both guys had no output. It was an embarrassing performance from both guys, and it just was a stain on the sport. One of the worst title fights of all time. Next up, Alex Pereira. I would say his best performance was the Yuri rematch on short notice, where he dominated Yuri Prochazka, made it look easy, almost finished him in the first round, and in the second round, finished him early. Complete domination. His worst performance, I would go with the Yuri rematch. Some may say Magomed, but honestly, I just think Magomed Ankalaev is way better than Yuri Prochazka. Maybe not as dangerous, but he's a much cleaner striker and a better grappler than Yuri. And Alex still won 2 rounds of the Magomed fight, and it was pretty competitive. But for the Yuri first fight, he lost the first round on the judges' scorecards. He did good with leg kicks, but he got controlled for a decent amount of that round. And then he was losing the second round up until the knockout. Next up, GSP. His best performance was easily the Matt Hughes third fight. You saw in every single one of the fights in the trilogy, he looked a little bit better. In the first fight, he lost in the first round. In the second fight, he won, but he didn't really dominate. He did get the finish, but it wasn't a dominant performance. Hughes looked pretty good. And then in the third fight, he beats Hughes, and he beats him at his own game. He takes him down and submits him, which is what Hughes did to him in the first fight. And you could just see GSP's improvement through every single fight in the trilogy. Matt Hughes is arguably the best fighter GSP has ever fought, and he made it look easy. Now, his worst performance, there's 2 options. The usual option would be Matt Serra. He got knocked out in the first round, but you could kind of say that he just got caught because he dominated Serra shortly after in the rematch. I think another bad performance of GSP's career would be the Johnny Hendricks fight. Now, he did get the win on paper, but if you watch the fight objectively, he lost the fight. It comes down to the first round, and he clearly lost the first round, and he just didn't look great. I know Hendricks was a good fighter, and he was on roids, so it was a very tough test for GSP. But it was one of the first times that we just didn't see GSP dominate. He was on a long streak where he was dominating guys, he was making it look easy, and this was kind of the fight that broke that streak and was one of the least impressive performances of his career. But I would say the Matt Serra fight would definitely be the worst performance of his career.